Just say it, man. Don't make me ask 20 questions.
What is the point?
Get to the point. Point.
Just say it already!
Welcome to the Podcram. Welcome back to the Podcram. We'll kick today off with the All-In Podcast Science Corner, where David Freeberg tells us the latest breakthroughs in life extension technology and gene editing. And then we'll follow that with something more immediately actionable. The head of the NIH, Dr. J. Bhattacharya, has officially made all the peer-reviewed articles it funds publicly available on PubMed Central, meaning you can now read the research funded by your tax dollars without having to pay the parasitic journals. Links can be found in the description. Enjoy!
Do you guys want to talk about age reversal?
Okay, yeah, let's talk about age reversal.
As is the case with most cutting-edge science nowadays, it is coming out of China, not out of the United States. So this research study was done on age reversal. We've talked about using these Yamanaka factors to change the epigenome of cells and make them youthful again. In this particular case, the study was done on engineering stem cells that were then placed into the bodies of monkeys and reverse the age of these monkeys on the order of what would be the equivalent in humans of several decades of age reversal. It's a pretty amazing and astounding result. So cell therapy is the modality that would be kind of employed at scale for humans to utilize this tool. There's a lot of work that's been done in age reversal in mice, some work in primates, some work in humans now, and there's obviously a few startups doing this based on the studies and research around Yamanaka factors. So kind of changing the epigenome and effectively getting cells to act youthful again. In this particular case, this team focused on a specific gene that it is known that when this gene is expressed or overexpressed, meaning the gene is turned on, it actually creates a whole bunch of signaling molecules, little tiny molecules that then get absorbed by other cells and tell those cells to start to act young again and reset those cells. And that gene is called FOXO3. So what this research team did is they took stem cells and they engineered them using CRISPR to get them to overexpress FOXO3. And so now these cells start making this FOXO3 protein. And when that cell starts making that FOXO3 protein, it actually makes a whole bunch of other molecules, little small proteins, little molecules. They then get packaged up into what are called exosomes. These are like little packets that get sput out of the cell and they get absorbed by other cells and trigger those cells. We don't know how, we don't know why necessarily, to start acting young again. So they engineered these stem cells, overexpressed FOXO3, and then put these stem cells in these monkeys. And these monkeys were kind of the equivalent of being 60 years old. And then they looked at what happened. So what happened? Well, they looked at tissue, they looked at blood, and they did MRIs and scans of the brain. And what they found is that the monkeys' brains effectively started to get completely rewired and act like young brains again. They were able to increase their memory, increase their responsiveness, their age-related atrophy reversed, so their brains actually grew. Their bones started to grow. Their muscles started to grow. Their blood cells started to reverse aging signals. So across bone degeneration reversed, they looked at 61 different tissues from 10 distinct systems in the bodies of these monkeys after they received the stem cell treatment. And 54% of the tissue examined showed reversal of age. In the case of lungs, they saw in monkeys, it was a 4-year age reversal, which is 12 years in humans. Skin reversed by 6 years, which is the equivalent of 18 years in humans. So imagine a 60-year-old person taking this, suddenly they're 40 years old in their skin. Skeletal muscle went by 5 years in the monkeys, which is the equivalent of 15 years in humans. So imagine going from being 60 years old to having the body of a 45-year-old in terms of muscles. The spleen, the brain, all across these different systems, they saw significant signals of age reversal. And then they identified these little exosomes. These are like little sacs that are spun out of the cell. And then they go into other cells and they start to trigger all of this age reversal cascade that happens. And by the way, they saw no side effects. They saw no negative health effects. There was no increase in cancer. These are the sorts of things you typically look for. And in tissue, in blood cells, in MRI, across the board, they saw age reversal. So it was a really kind of incredible result. And I think that it opens up the door for this idea of using cell therapy based on stem cells that are engineered to be injected into blood to actually reverse aging in humans. And I think that we should expect over the next couple of years, these sorts of trials to kind of begin to see if we can see similar results. There's a lot of background work, by the way, in FOXO3 in this particular gene, a lot of background work in engineering stem cells, a lot of background work, obviously, in Yamanaka factor and other age reversal that predicated this. But this particular paper, I think, put a lot of things together and showed some pretty nice results.
Do you think Yamanaka factors are the thing still, or do you think that there's going to be a lot of other genetic manipulations that advance age reversal before Yamanaka factors do?
The latter is more of this, what we call like a complex cascade of proteins and molecules that we haven't identified yet, that we don't know how or why they do what they do. That's what we just saw with this study. We don't know what's in those exosome sacs, and we don't know why they cause other cells to reverse their age. We don't quite understand the mechanism. It's really hard. So I think that this becomes sort of, call it an easier path. Whereas with the Yamanaka factors, if you apply too much, the cells don't just rejuvenate, they can become, cancerous.
Let me ask it more directly. Other than the novelty of all of this, do you think there will be something in the market, some injectable or something that's average people like us can take in the next 5 or 10 years to solve a problem that we have or to live longer with higher health?
Yes, there are clinicals underway right now. And I know of the clinical trials that are underway.
Like in stage 3, you're saying? Phase 3 clinical trials?
Early stage 1 in humans.
Like 1As?
Yeah, very early.
So maybe a decade from now.
I think that's right. Well, look, let's see what the FDA does. But the FDA is trying to accelerate outcomes here, as you know.
Blake Byers came to my house for poker. He's sponsoring a study at UCSF, which I thought was incredible. You know the gene that allows Donald Trump to sleep 4 hours?
Yeah.
They've isolated that gene.
Yeah.
Clinton had that gene too. And Blake is sponsoring a trial to basically edit a handful of subjects who want that gene to see if they can sleep 4 hours and be rested. So I don't know if you guys know this, and he explained this to me, and it makes so much sense, but I didn't realize it. We sleep 20 years of our life, we're sleeping.
Yeah.
And so if you can cut it in half, you get an extra 10 years of living. If you think about it like that way, that is an incredible reason to, do the gene editing to get the Trump gene. But the thing that nobody knows is what
we could ski all day and play poker all night.
The thing that they don't know is, Trump and Clinton were born with that gene from day one. And what they don't know is what could go wrong if you injected it and manipulated yourself at the age of 30 or 40 or 50.
Yeah, of course.
But wouldn't it be incredible if you could all of a sudden only sleep 4 or 5 hours and be completely rested?
Well, do you remember at the All In Summit, Nikki Polk? She gave a talk on this gene. That was her opening piece. That's definitely in sight, Chamath. I know there's a bunch of labs working on that exact gene target. But this was just amazing because this is a cell therapy. So you can kind of think about getting an injection done. You get an infusion done of these stem cells, and all of a sudden your skin is 20 years younger. It's incredible.
Like my foreskin?
If this actually plays out, your foreskin, yeah, if you have it.
I kept it because it's like a sheath. It's like a sheath for the anaconda.
Like a sleeping bag?
It's like a sleeping bag.
The first thing that I really want to draw up from earlier in our conversation is you pointed out that the current model of NIH is that taxpayer dollars pay for the basic research and for the exploration of whether or not the findings from that basic research will benefit disease. If there's any technology, device, drug, whatever, that is brought to the public through the private sector. Put differently, the taxpayers fund the research and development, but they don't capture any of the upside from the private companies that make money selling you the SSRI, selling you the hopefully someday novel Alzheimer's treatment. We don't yet have a satisfactory treatment for Alzheimer's, as we'll get into. So the general public who are not basic scientists, in other words, if I take off my hat as a basic scientist and I say, yeah, I'm a taxpayer. I give a significant amount of my income to the state of California and to the federal government. I like science. I certainly would like to live a long, healthy life. And I hope some of that science helps me do that. But I'm going to have to buy back the results of what I paid for. That's where I think a lot of the general public sit. And I'm not saying they don't like, appreciate, and respect science and scientists, but to any rational person, don't need a degree in economics to say, that kind of sucks. I'm paying, and made worse, if I want to read a paper that was published with the work that I provided from my tax dollars, I have to buy that from the journal.
By the way, that changes in July.
Okay.
Yeah,
this is a huge issue.
That's one of the decisions I made.
Yeah, it's at $34.
Not anymore.
Listen, I've been grateful to publish in Nature and Science. These are like Super Bowl rings for scientists. I'm sure it's part of the reason I got tenure at Stanford. And I had great fun doing the work, and I believe in the work. It stood the test of time. But were I not an employee of Stanford that pays for the subscriptions to those journals, I have to buy the work back using my tax dollars that funded the work. This is crazy. This is like me giving you the money for the supplies to build a home. You get to live in the home. I don't even get to see the home. I have to purchase a ticket to see the home. That's how irrational it is from the perspective of somebody who's just not understanding the pipeline and of basic to applied research. So I want to return to that briefly because this relates, in my opinion, directly to IDC. So that's a crazy picture for anyone that doesn't understand how one piece relates to the next. And now that I'm in media, I'm public facing, what I've come to learn is that the general public is very smart. Max Delbruck was right. Assume infinite intelligence and zero knowledge, but it's very hard for people to connect more than 2 or 3 dots. They're busy. So we could talk all day about how this leads to that, leads to this, the brick on the wall model, and then there's this treatment. And they're like, I'm paying for this stuff and I can't even read the paper about it, let alone glean the positive benefits without paying out the nose.
Yeah. So a couple of things. Let me go backwards because you had two major issues you brought up. So first, the journal thing. My predecessor, Monica Bertagnolli, who was the NIH director, the National Institute for Health director before me, she made a decision, a great decision, essentially to say if the NIH supports a scientist's work, and then that work leads to a journal publication, that publication ought to be available free to the public immediately upon publication. You're not allowed, as an NIH-funded scientist, to publish in a journal that doesn't have that as a policy. Mm-hmm. That policy was due to go into effect in December of this year. I think it's a great policy because I agree with your analysis entirely. If the American taxpayer pays for the research, why shouldn't the American taxpayer be able to read the research for free? Because they already paid for it. Why do they pay a second time on the back end after the research is published?
And it's not like it's free if you're a university employee. The university has to purchase a very costly subscription to the journal in order for a faculty member to read the papers. Now, I'm lucky enough I can access pretty much any paper in the world, but that's because Stanford spends millions and millions of dollars. And it's made worse. I forgot the one real stinger in this. When you publish a paper, you use taxpayer dollars to pay the journal.
That's correct.
Thousands of dollars to publish it, then they sell it back to the general public.
Nature charges $12,000 for like the major pieces. So that's a racket. Right. Yeah.
Sorry, I realize I'm talking more than I'm asking questions.
No, this is. Yeah. I mean, I'm agreeing with you. Monica Bertagnolli, the previous NIH director, in December of this year, she made a policy that those papers have to be available to the public for free. I made a decision. One of my first things I did was I said, why wait till December? Let's just do it in July.
Great. Thank you.
And so starting in July, what you just said will no longer be the case. The Americans and everybody will have access to the papers that the Americans already paid for if they're NIH funded for free.
Thank you. On the behalf of, literally, this isn't a political statement, on the behalf of myself and every other American citizen, thank you. We've been paying for this research forever and have had to pay to get it back. I mean, it's not like journal editors make that much money, but the journals make a fortune. So Macmillan Press, Elsevier, I've done my homework on this. We're talking billions of dollars in income.
And the marginal cost of publishing now is effectively zero. It's just you put it online, right? And there's some cost for maintaining the web page and all that, and there's some editorial staff, but like the level of investments that the public had been making for the NIH to then be asked to pay $30, $50, $100 for the papers itself that are published, I mean, it's just insulting. And actually, it impedes the progress of science because it makes it so that there's this barrier where regular people can't get access to the things that scientists are talking about, right? So there's like this public transparency aspect of it. Where the scientists ought to be engaging with the public about their ideas, right? The idea is that we are just living in this ivory tower, and only we get to decide what's true and false, and then we impose it on the public. During the pandemic, we saw the folly of that model, right? So it's I think a small step forward, but an important one.
I think you're being humble, and I'd like to point out that I think it's a big step forward because it's not just a token to the public for all their dollars over the last. How old is the NIH?
100 and some years.
100 and some years. It's really what should have happened a long time ago. Yeah. So thank you very much. And I guess thank you to Monica as well for initiating this, but thanks for accelerating that.
Thanks for listening to this installment of The Podcram. I hope it contains something useful for you. If you enjoyed these selections and are curious about the curator's own thoughts, you can check out my other podcast, Psychic Lube, where I share concise concepts meant to grease the intellectual gears and help get your creative juices flowing. Each episode is an ongoing collaborative project that welcomes listeners to expand or rebut its points by email or comment, the most interesting of which get incorporated through periodic re-recordings. As always, if you're intrigued by today's content, I encourage you to go listen to the full podcast in its original form directly from its creators so that their sponsors keep paying them to make stuff for us and nobody feels compelled to sue me for copyright infringement. Now, get off your phone and go do smart stuff. Have a productive day.